Hello world, this is Nick. Thanks for joining me again. In this video, we're going to be setting up Ubuntu and performing some basic configurations for the system. First off, we need to install a VirtualBox component called Guest Additions, and this allows us to run the virtual machine more stable and with higher performance. So as again, in the previous videos, I'm going to full screen. And then once you've got this, in the menu bar on the bottom, you're going to select Devices and insert Guest Additions CD image. I've already inserted that, which is right here. Now, as you can see, the performance here is quite horrible. So I'm going to run this. I click on Properties. I'm going to make sure that it's executable, and it is. Now we do have to go into the terminal or command line for a moment. So this is going to be your first look at the terminal. We are going to cover quite a bit of the command line interface in Linux in, I believe, the second or third module of this series. It's quite big and it can do quite a bit. So hit the super key, and that's going to bring up the dash. You can also click this icon on the top left to bring up the dash. Here we have different scopes. So the default home scope is going to be loaded right now. I'm going to switch to applications. In applications, we're going to see installed, recently used plugins. So I'm going to select installed, and here we can actually look at the applications that are installed in the system right now. This is pretty inefficient if you're trying to launch an application and know exactly which application you want to load. So I'm going to close the dash here. Turn to the desktop. I'm going to hit the super key to bring up the dash again, and I'm just going to start typing the application name that I want to run. In this case, it's going to be terminal, and you can see at this point, once I get term written in there, the first result is terminal. That's what I want to launch. If the application you are looking for is the first in the list, you can just hit enter, and it should launch that application. Now, there are shortcuts also in Linux to launch terminal, and one of them is to just click Control, Alt, and T on your keyboard at the same time. That's going to bring up terminal here. Now what we need to do is open it in the specific location. So within the file manager, I'm going to right click and click Open in Terminal. Now here we can see this is the location that we're in. We're in VBox Additions right here. So what I'm going to do is run this program here. It must be run with administrative privileges, which means you need to add sudo to the beginning of this command. And the great thing about Linux is that for anything to actually modify the core of the system, install applications, remove them, stuff like that, it requires administrative rights, and it's going to force you to enter your password. Now this can get frustrating sometimes, and so there are ways around it, and we're going to discuss that in very near future. Run files, or files with .run file extensions, can be run directly from the terminal by just basically typing the name of the file and run. Now, Why I put a period and a forward slash here is to indicate to the terminal that the file that we want to run is in the current directory. So period forward slash in Linux means current directory. And that would be this. This is the directory we're in. So this tells it that the file is in this directory and the run extension automatically runs it. So we don't really need to, issue a whole ton of commands. It's pretty simple as far as running files. Now it's adding kernel modules. So the kernel, as we discovered in video 1, is called Linux. That is the kernel for Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora. Every Linux distribution out there uses Linux as the kernel. So the kernel's job is to translate between software and hardware. And so in this instance, what we've got right now is a screen resolution is pretty terrible. I think it's 1280 by 768. So it's very square, not widescreen. So what we're going to do by installing these modules, this is going to allow us to configure the screen resolution to that the hardware actually supports. And so that's why we need to install VirtualBox Guest Additions in order to get better performance. It's also very laggy right now, and what we should see is that once we reboot after installing these VirtualBox Additions files, when we reboot, we should see a huge increase in performance, which is going to be great. Seems like this is going to take a little bit, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll be back when this successfully installs. All right, people, so it is done. So what we're going to do, as suggested on this line in the terminal right here, we may want to restart. So close this, and this is painfully laggy. It's not just, a bit laggy, it's pretty painful. So in the user menu here, the cog icon, we're going to go down to shutdown and select restart.